Created by James Mitchell. No More Games. Written and read by Craig W. Braddock. Chapter 1. This is BBC Radio 4. Now the world at one. The chimes of Big Ben and the solitary striking of the hour reverberated from a small and ancient Bakelite radio from one end of the short shop counter. At the other end lay an equally decrepit cash register, whose pound, shilling, and pence display had rendered it obsolete nearly 15 years earlier. Behind the counter stood a slightly stooped, grey-haired man, and his heavy-framed glasses somehow made him look shorter than his true height. His paunch was barely covered by an aging mustard sweater, an almost exact match for his nicotine-stained fingertips. The man observed the small shop floor, the checkerboard tiles, many cracked, containing decades of worn-in dirt and cigarette ash. The walls, which were once whitewashed, were now, depending on where you looked, a tribute to dust, grime, and general neglect. It was said during the war the shop windows had been blown out, and their replacements rattled as yet another Piccadilly line train went underneath the floorboards. It was always draughty in the shop, and out of habit the man drifted his head skyward as the light that shone from the ceiling gently moved to and fro in the breeze. Under the light was a table. Whatever may be said for the condition of the premises clearly did not apply to what was obviously the centerpiece of the whole enterprise. About 10 feet long and covered with green baize cloth, dusty old books weighed down both ends. On the surface of the table was a landscape with hills and symbols representing topographical features, but most eye-catching of all were hundreds of brightly painted model soldiers. Some were painted primarily red, some primarily blue. Some had white faces, some had black faces. There were infantrymen, cavalry, snipers, all strategically placed over the playing surface. The attention to detail was outstanding. Looking up from the gaming table, the man gazed at the far wall, no more than 15 feet from where he was standing. There were undusted pictures from old military magazines of men in uniform together, with faded posters for Woodbine cigarettes, Bovril, and Jay's carbolic soap. They had been there so long, you would almost miss them entirely if you did not stare at them. For some reason, the man liked it that way. The man walked from the counter to the front door. Pushing 50, there was something very careworn about him. His face had an open quality, one may even say comforting. But if you looked in a certain light, his face almost appeared expressionless, blank, except for two piercing blue eyes that were different, younger, more vibrant. Despite his middle-aged spread, the man had the gait of someone much younger. His arms and legs were still well toned, and his stoop all but disappeared as he locked the door and turned out onto a Caledonian road. One of the new brightly coloured single-decker red buses trundled past. On board, a man with receding, combed-over hair noticed the large model soldier in the shop window. Looking upwards, he saw the shop sign, Schneider Games. A few minutes later, the man from the game shop walked into the newsagent. It was one of those shops where the newspapers tilted towards you from the counter, and the newsagent automatically slid down a packet of 20 Players Number 6, the choice of one of his more frequent customers. "Ah, Mr. Schneider." The newsagent quickly ducked below the counter and reappeared with a copy of Wargaming magazine. "That'll be £2.20, please." As Schneider walked back to his shop, the sun broke through the eternal grey skies of North London. Suddenly Schneider was more aware of his surroundings. Nearly all of the shops were boarded up, but Schneider could hear the noise from the flats and bedsits upstairs as he went by. From one was the sound of reggae. 24 steps or so later, the sound of a girl obviously being fucked hard by her customer, and the slightly metallic taste of marijuana almost crackled on his tongue before he reached his own front door. Back in the shop, Schneider stood behind the counter, as he did most days. The volume on the ancient radio was on the blink, but with a short, violent karate chop to the loudspeaker. The radio sprung back into life. Radio 2 Sport, and here is our football correspondent, Peter Jones. Tomorrow sees the opening day of the new Callan League football season, and all eyes will be on Liverpool Football Club as they open their first league campaign since the Heysel Stadium disaster in May. Radio 2, said Schneider out loud. Something was wrong. The dial had been moved. Schneider's heart raced, and he suddenly looked around the shop to see if anything was different. Because of the sunshine, Schneider failed to register the overhead light had gone out. But this was a very old building, and the wiring sometimes caused fuses to blow. Looking down at the gaming table, Schneider saw shattered glass all over the green landscape. Looking up, he could see the destroyed light bulb filament still bayoneted into the light fitting. Schneider realized he could hear his own heart thumping in his chest. He quickly looked around as voices, stern Russian voices, echoed in his head, seemingly becoming louder by the second. He ducked beneath the counter and closed his eyes shut in the hope he would not vomit. He didn't know how long he had been crouched down there, but the noises in his mind subsided and his heartbeat slowed. Still, it took Schneider a few minutes before he reached up for the counter, placed his hands on the edge, and cautiously eased himself to an upright position. Before his eyes had truly focused, Schneider saw a figure with a snub-nosed revolver pointed straight at his chest. Stepping back against the wall, Schneider felt his knees buckle once more. The figure was a man in his early 40s with receding combed-over hair. Replacing the gun, the man smiled at Schneider. "Hello, David. How nice to see you again after all these years."